Every type of country around the world has some type of government to help control the way things go on within its borders. Governments are made up normally, not always, but normally, of a central government and then smaller local units. In the United States, the central government is called the federal government, and our local units are the states. Now, that's just in the United States. I don't believe there's another central government that's called a federal government. Not all countries are like ours, and this presentation is going to go over the three main types of governments. They are the federal, unitary, and confederal. As I said, the governmental system in the United States is a federal system. This is a unique situation where the central government and the local entities in the United States, the federal government and the state governments in the states share power back and forth. In a federal system of government, authority is divided between the two types. In some ways, they are equal. We are the perfect example of this. It doesn't always work this way in the rest of the world. The United States is a wonderful experiment in this type of democracy, and it works well for us. This is a system that we're used to. The central government has powers in certain areas, and the local entities, the states, have powers in others. Sometimes they overlap, and we will cover that later. In a unitary system of government, the central government has all the power. They have all the authority. It comes from on high. It comes from the people. They elect the central government, but they control everything. If there are any powers that local entities have, it's because the central government has given it to them. In a unitary system, the central government can create new local entities or disband local entities. An example of a country with a unitary system is Great Britain. Great Britain is a wonderful example. Parliament runs the show. Now, there are counties all over England, and those counties have certain powers and authority vested to them from the central government. But if population changed and for some reason Parliament decided we needed to have another county, they could create it. They could give them whatever power that they want, that they seem is necessary to conduct whatever business that local entity needs to do. But the central government is in control completely. There is no shared authority. Any authority that the local entities might have is given to them from the central government. In a confederal system of government, it's just the exact opposite from a unitary system. Here, all the power and all the authority lie within the local entities. And if the central government has any power, it comes from those local entities. It's a little hard to grasp that concept until you give an example. Some great examples throughout history are the European Union, which is currently going on, the United Nations, which is also a formation. In this case, the United Nations, the local entities would be all the countries from around the world, and what they decide together would be the United Nations. That would be the sum of them. And the problem is that these confederal governments often don't have power, or at least the authority to exercise that power. A couple of prime examples that failed were the Confederate States of America, which were disbanded at the end of the Civil War, and the United States under the Articles of Confederation. Historically, confederal systems always fail. Now, you could say that the United Nations is still in play and the European Union still exists, but with Brexit going on and England trying to leave the European Union, you can see how there are problems. If one of the local entities doesn't like being a part of the central government, it can decide to leave. They don't have to necessarily obey everything that the central government puts forth. One of the problems that the United States had under the Articles of Confederation is that every state had different money. Every state had different laws. There was no way to enforce laws across state borders. So you had the United States, but what it was a loose group of independent states that were calling themselves the United States that had their own rules. and it eventually fell apart, and that's why we had a constitutional convention and ended up with the Constitution that we have now. As I mentioned, the United States is a federal government. It runs on a federal system. That's where central government shares power with the local entities. In the United States, the federal government shares power with the states. And this is how this slide represents the distribution of power in the United States. On the left are the national powers, only things that the federal government can do. On the right are state powers. Those are only things that the states can do. And in the middle are concurrent powers, which means that both the state and the federal government have the ability to make these rules or enforce these laws. They have these powers. So, for instance, it's obvious that the United States as a country can only declare war. At no point in time can Indiana be upset with Iran and declare war on Iran all by itself. It is only the United States. The United States makes treaties with foreign countries. It coins the money. Each state does not have an independent type of money. The United States has one type of money, and only the federal government can create it. The federal government can make any law it deems necessary to conduct the business that the Constitution says that it must. The federal government is the only place that can admit new states. You know, Kentucky can't say, hey, let's make Puerto Rico a state. I say yes, and then it's a state. Only the federal government can do that. They only conduct foreign affairs, and the federal government raises and maintains the military forces of the United States. Now, if you look over the other side, you'll see that state powers, one of the state powers is that the states maintain a militia, and that would be the Indiana National Guard. That's what the militia is today. Each National Guard unit is broken down by state. Now, the federal government can call for the National Guard to come and aid them in their endeavors, but the state maintains that militia, not the federal government. The state also regulates any trade within its borders. The federal government does not. Each state gets to decide how they're going to conduct elections every year and who is qualified to actually vote. They provide for the public health, safety, and morals. That's kind of an odd thing, but if you think about it, the states on the East Coast might have different morals than states in the Midwest or even on the West Coast. So every state is slightly different. The state powers also establish local governments. If a city sprouts up, it's the state that decides that it's a city or a town. Sometimes towns grow to the point where they're cities. That's a state decision. And only the states can ratify amendments to the Constitution. For there to be an amendment to the Constitution, it has to pass both houses of Congress by a 2/3 vote, and then 3/4 of all the states have to agree, or else that amendment does not become law. It is not added to the Constitution. So this is a little breakdown of the types of government that there are around the world, particularly that the United States is a federal system where power is shared between the federal government, the central government, and the states, which are the local units.